right. Welcome to Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods. I'm your host, Corey Nathan. This is where we get to speak with the brilliant and creative people who make the greatest coming attractions, movie posters, and digital campaigns of all time. This program is brought to you by 2496 Sound and Music Design, the best sound design and music elements in the business. We're also brought to you by the Golden Trailer Awards and by Soundstripe, the best royalty-free music for video, ads, and film. And today we are continuing our tribute to Andy Kuehn, the founder of Kaleidoscope and the father of the modern trailer industry. I'm so pleased to be joined once again by Benedict Coulter, the original rock star trailer editor. Benny, so good to be with you, man. How you doing?
Hi, Corey. Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I am doing great. And our special guests today are Dawn Baillie and Clive Baillie, two of the founding partners of BLT Communications, which was started in 1992 with connections to Andy Kuehn and Kaleidoscope, and has become one of the most successful creative agencies in the history of the business. Dawn, Clive, so good to be with you. How are you all doing?
Good. Nice to be here.
Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. You know, you say something that I think really captures the spirit of BLT. You say that our focus has always been the work, the people who create it, and the people we create it for. And I'm curious to what degree maybe that was inspired by the very beginnings of BLT and folks like Andy.
Well, we started BLT because computers came into where we were previously, and the three of us, Clive, Rick, and I, wanted to not work with a computer operator. We wanted to be making the work ourselves. And computers back then, Apple's, were very expensive. And we wanted to create a place where we could still make the art without having to have a technician in between us. And meeting Andy and Steve, they were very much about letting us investigate that possibility where we could remain the artists and continue to make the work ourselves. And they were very supportive of that idea and the idea of where we saw the business going at that time. We were one of the first agencies where the art directors dove in. It was pre-layers on Photoshop. In fact, it wasn't Photoshop yet when we started. It was Color Studio. There were no layers. So it was kind of a ballsy move on our part, really, to think that we could just go in and start a business this way. And we found at Kaleidoscope that they were completely supportive of us to do that.
I'm curious how that conversation came about. I do want to back up a little bit, and folks who have been listening to the program for a long time have heard your individual stories, but I know that there was some overlap for both of you at Seiniger and Dazu before you conceived BLT. So if you would, why don't we start there? If you could give us a little sketch of your own backgrounds, what led to this conversation, and then I'd love to pick your brain about how those original conversations with Steve and Andy to build this idea of what became BLT came about.
Why don't you go with that?
Sorry, that's a big question, Clive. Yeah, give us a little bit of sketch. So, so I'll give you the bullet points there. Correct me if I get anything wrong. London, Canon, production, BD Fox, Seiniger, Dazu.
Yeah.
Do I got that about right for you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know what was interesting? I forgot about the production part. Does that
Which production part?
You were an on-set carpenter or something like that?
Yeah, I was as a set carpenter on the original Masters of the Universe.
Oh man.
I'd worked at Canon Films and I had to leave because of my immigration status. So I needed an interim job, and I got a job as a set carpenter on the original Masters of the Universe. And when I went to interview, they were desperate for carpenters, and the guy said, "Are you a good joiner?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. I'm a great joiner." So he said, "Well, can you start tomorrow?" I went out, and the money I had left, I went out that day and bought whatever I needed, the tools I needed, and a tool belt to start the next day. And he put me with this other joiner who knew when I was holding up a flat, I was using a nail gun, and I fired the nail gun, and it went into my finger.
Okay.
And I think at that point he knew I wasn't a carpenter, let alone a set joiner. But they were so desperate for people to build this set that I stayed on there.
Right.
Yeah.
The only thing I knew about, if somebody said, "Are you a joiner?" I would say I played Snug the Joiner in Midsummer Night's Dream. That's about as close as I would have come to. But in all seriousness, so a couple things about your background, Canon and being on set. But Canon, I think, had some editors in-house there. I think Seth Gavin was an
they
editor.
did everything in-house at the time. Yeah.
And were some of those folks, I believe that some of those folks were at Kaleidoscope. Is there any connection there? Or is that more?
Not when we had started a BLT at Kaleidoscope. I don't remember there being any of the original people from. I could be wrong. I don't remember any of the original people from Canon being there, but I know those Canon was just a awful films, but a great place to work and very supportive. They just in that environment where Menachem and Yoram just let people do their job. They trusted everybody to do their job. And it was such a great creative environment. You learned so much from working there, and we just I think that because of that creative environment, it was just everybody just spread out throughout the industry over time. And I remember bumping into people at some of the Kiat Award events or some of those charity dinners we used to go to, and say, "Oh yeah, that's right, we used to work at Canon Films together."
Yeah. And then did you, you and Dawn meet at Seiniger?
Seiniger's, yeah. I'd worked at BD Fox for a couple of years, and I just dropped my portfolio off at Seiniger's when it was on 3rd Street, and I didn't know whether they were going to. I just dropped it off, and I got a call the next day to come in and meet with Tony and Mike Kaiser, and they offered me a job. This was the second time I'd been. The first time I went to see Tony Seiniger, he wasn't interested in anything to do. It took 2 years working at BD Fox, on campaigns there, and then I got the job, and I was thrown in, put in the same office as Dawn, and I think it was Dawn and Dave Christensen.
Oh, wow.
And that's how we met, and we worked together.
Did you recognize each other's, I mean, I don't know if you would put it this way, but did you recognize each other's brilliance early on in those days?
I thought Dawn was brilliant.
I mean, you were, to be fair, Dawn, you were, it was clear that others saw something in you, and were championing your work at a fairly early stage. Or am I reading that wrong? Or
Well, my journey to Tony was through being a movie extra. So I was a movie extra, and I met a little man, Izzy Kaplan, who was a older gentleman who was a movie extra, and he was neighbors with a man called Bill Flax, who was a friend of Tony Seiniger's. He owned a printing company. He printed movie posters, and that was my roundabout way in. And Tony, I brought original paintings because I studied illustration painting at Otis, and I brought paintings into Tony, and he was looking at my paintings, not quite sure what to make of it until I brought in a life-size painting I did of Harold and Maude, for an idea for a poster for that. And he liked that, and he hired me, but he didn't tell me what he hired me to do. So when I showed up for my job, not only did I not know what I would be making, money-wise, but I didn't care. I just wanted to work there. It was like a dream come true. I just always wanted to do movie posters, and everybody was just kind of trying to find what I could fit at. So I tried to be a production artist, and I cut all of my fingers with X-Acto blade, accidentally bleeding on the mechanicals for Peggy Sue Got Married was the first thing I was trying to do. Peggy Sue Got Married Academy campaigns where you had to re-break paragraphs of quotes to fit into different size specs, and I was no good at that. So, but Tony did see something in me, and I am grateful to him, and I still talk to him pretty regularly. So,
Oh, that's great. So take me through that time. You were with each other, and then I guess Rick you met at Dazu.
no, I met Rick at Seiniger. He was
Oh,
there
okay.
when I started.
Okay. So take me to that moment when you decided, hey, there's something else here. What ultimately became BLT. How did those conversations come about among you? And then how did those conversations emerge with you and Steve and Andy? And, how did that all come about?
Well, we were when Rick left Seiniger, I followed Rick. Rick recruited me to go over to it was called Spiros at the time, and it was just becoming Dazu as a new
Okay.
company. And Rick recruited me to go over there, and I worked there for about 6 months, and then I recruited Clive to follow. Um, and like I was saying, we were still doing everything manual. It was still the newest innovation for us was using color Xerox machines. And we were airbrushing and doing things by hand for the most part. We were still sending typography out to a typesetter to get done and cutting it apart. It was still a different kind of craft. It was a real craftsman kind of thing. You had to have hand skills. We didn't have computers. While we were at Dazu, they invested in like when I worked on Silence of the Lambs, that was the first time that we had a digital finish done on Quantel paint box, electric paint at the time. And that was like at the beginning of things being done on computers. But it wasn't like I could put my hand on the computer. It was like, oh no, don't touch that. But but for example, the comp I made with airbrushing on top of a mezzotint, and then in order to finish it, it's like the first time trying to play with what that meant using a computer.
Mm.
Then Dazu, the owner, Jack Mammon, he invested in buying a computer to set up. Back then, it was like $100,000 investment. It wasn't like what it is now. It's a big investment to buy technology then. And with that, you had to hire somebody who understood the computer. So you would sit behind a person who was doing the work, and that seemed if you had hand skills, you were watching somebody and getting that itch of, I could do that better, you know? But the problem is that when you have people who are passionate about making work and they want to do it themselves and make it better, and at that point in time is like a $300,000 investment each time, that becomes a big problem. You can't buy a system for everybody working for you at that point in time, right? So, but that's where the three of us saw the future, and it wasn't going to happen with Jack, with Jack Mammon at the time. I mean, as much as we liked the freedom and the company, we really felt strongly about the future being completely different. And I had an offer to go start a print division with Cynthia Wick at Aspect, and Rick had an offer to go to Poetic Justice. And I'd been talking with Clive about what our options are and what's the best thing. And we thought the three of us were at a really remarkable point in our career where we could launch. We had really good client contacts. We were really friendly with Nancy Gallagher, and Nancy was the one that we talked to and about our idea of how to move into the future. And she arranged a meeting with Andy and Steve.
Had you met Andy at that point?
Not before that meeting, no.
Okay.
But Mark Trugman was part of that meeting as well.
Okay. So, but did you know Trugman already?
No.
So
No,
all
that's
these
the
are
first
new.
time.
I'm so curious what your first impression of Andy and Steve and Andy in particular. I mean, this is the tribute to Andy Kuehn, but I'm so curious what your first impressions of Andy were.
All right. So Andy Kuehn has he had skin the color of tea, let's say. Like he was so bronzed. And his hair was so perfect, and his ascot was so Hollywood, and his jackets were so impeccable, and he was like Hollywood royalty, right? You walked into the office there, and you're just like, holy cow! Like this, it's like the first time. I mean, obviously, I knew Tony Seiniger, but Tony was a kind of New York kind of person, and Andy was like a Hollywood kind of person, and it was really exciting. It's like, wow, we made it. We're talking to Andy Kuehn, it's like you said, the Godfather trailers, you just felt like not only, I mean, he embodied that, right?
Yeah. Clive, is that what your similar to what your first impression was?
Yeah, we had two things. We had our portfolio that we made, the three of us, all the work for the three of us, and we had a business plan that we'd put together, and I know that the business plan had been sent to Steve, and he gave it to Mark Trugman, and Mark Trugman said, "This makes no sense whatsoever," and we found the business plan about 10, 15 years ago, and it was ridiculous business. We had no idea what we were writing, but we felt like we had to put a business plan together. And so the meeting, we went to the meeting, and it's exactly as Dawn described, with Mark and Steve and Andy. And I think what we learned about that meeting was, Dawn and I have often talked about when hiring people, you're looking for talent, but if they have enthusiasm for what they do, you figure you can teach them the rest of it. And I think that's when we went with our portfolio. And I think it was an impressive portfolio that we had. And showing it to the three of them, that's what they invested in. The business plan made no sense, but they invested in us because of the work we had, because of our enthusiasm, because of the reputation we had and that's where it came about. And I think the combination of those first 5 years of BLT, having that partnership with them was one of the most important elements of our success. Steve had this kind of tough love approach to us, always pushing us and telling us how things ought to be done. And Mark was like someone that we could sit with and get his counsel. And Andy was the guy, you go into this beautiful office, Art Deco office that you had, and you'd sit down and you'd just talk about old Hollywood. And he was very supportive of us. I remember I don't know, it was a year or two into the business, he said to us, it was the greatest investment he had ever made was BLT. And there was a fourth part of that as well, which was Julius. And Julius, he was the CFO of Kaleidoscope, and he and Andy were very, very close. And between all four of them, they just gave us this foundation that was so important. I'm not sure. BLT probably would have succeeded in their first 5 years, but I don't know that it would have succeeded in the way it has done without those initial 5 years of learning from people like Andy Kuehn, and Mark and Julius and Steve. And it was this passion that Andy had for Hollywood and movies, and he was a great partner.
Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods is brought to you by the Golden Trailer Awards. For folks who are just starting to get plugged in, the GTAs is an unconventional ceremony that honors excellence in feature film trailers, teasers, and movie marketing. Or as some folks like to think of it, it's the award ceremony for the short attention span. We all just celebrated the 25th Golden Trailer Awards. So would that be the Silver Golden Trailer Awards? Either way, it was a terrific show. Monica and Evie do such a wonderful job putting it together. Tons of fun, so much awesome work across the board. And mostly, it was just great to be together as a community. So keep an eye out for a number of exciting developments over the next year. Just make sure to stay plugged in at goldentrailer.com for a ton of exciting developments. That's goldentrailer.com.
Yeah.
So I have some specific questions about that time. But Benny, I'm curious, Clive and Dawn have already shared so much that seemed to parallel your experience. And I'm curious what your thoughts are from, how you over time embraced the technology, to the desire to be hands-on with the creative. You as an editor, Clive, Dawn, and Rick as art directors, starting a business, building a business. But there are so many parallels to your story. So I'm curious what your thoughts are hearing Clive and Dawn's trajectory here in their early days.
Well, it's funny. I mean, with all the different interviews we've been doing now, the theme seems to be, Andy was this old Hollywood, this glamour, he oozed Hollywood. He was so glamorous. But I really relate to what Clive was saying about the wonderful thing about Andy, and what I experienced also was Andy's support and encouragement of exploring artistically. He never held you back. He supported you, and it gave you the confidence to try things and explore things artistically, which maybe some other people wouldn't have given so much freedom to. Um, it was very interesting when Clive and Don and Rick arrived at Kaleidoscope. I'd been there. What years did you guys come to?
92.
92. So I had been there already 15 years. And so the trailer world had been my world. And I really didn't know much about print. I mean, I knew the other companies that did print, but, all of a sudden we were told, well, there's this group that's coming in. They're going to be our print division. And I slowly learned and observed their work, and their work was extraordinary. I was blown away by what they did. It was like, I had been exposed to the art of cutting trailers and how putting stuff together with AV, but I had never seen the other side of how to create print. And much more challenging because they were working from nothing most of the time. They created the images and they compiled images. And unfortunately, I was there only 2 more years after they arrived, but I had the great honor and pleasure of collaborating with them on Natural Born Killers. And they came up with graphics and ideas that to this day, I look at this piece and it's just so cool and different. So my observation of them coming to Kaleidoscope was just it expanded the Kaleidoscope's world into incredible other areas of print that we had never been in, and all of us editors of Kaleidoscope were exposed to other artists, amazing artists that elevated our game.
Benny,
All,
did you
all
start?
with the support of Andy.
Did you start incorporating whether it was practical, elements like typeface or aspects of design into your trailers, or was it
We
more
did. I mean, I think that, because we all work for Steve and Andy,
yeah.
sometimes they asked probably Clive and Don and Rick saying, come up with a little graphic here, or give us what typeface should we use. But my collaboration on Natural Born Killers was a lot more than that. We shot stuff. We shot a flag upside down with words of the narration, and it was just unbelievable. It was so cool. This was skip before skip.
The other thing I'm really curious about, Dawn, the way when we first started talking here, the way you describe the thought process of an artist and the desire of a creative person to not be too removed from the actual creative process, but then also other parts of your philosophy that I think has been critical to and is still emblematic of what BLT is all about. Clive, the way you describe, philosophies about hiring people, is that something that you absorbed, just by being there at Kaleidoscope, or were these conversations that you were actually having and fleshing out these philosophies and these approaches to the work were the actual conversations that you had with Andy and Trugman and Steve?
I think Dawn and both Benedict will understand this as well. We were so lucky that we entered a business where there was money being spent, and you could just focus on the creativity. And that's what the important thing about in Kaleidoscope, in that building, was the creativity was just on another level, we felt. And it was a very open environment. We've worked in places where creative people can be very protective of their space and not want to share ideas or material, but we could go into Benedict's office or Paul Rollins or other people, and you could sit and just chat with them about creativity. And the environment we tried to create at BLT was just the sharing of ideas and not, I think we'd worked places where you learned how to important things, how to do things well. You also you learned how to not do things, and you took the best things you had learned from previous jobs and companies you worked at and applied it there. And I just think it was such a incredible environment to work in. And Andy was someone who really appreciated creativity. He loved art and movies, and he was so complimentary and supportive of what we did, and we were left alone to do, and we were left alone, and the numbers kind of took care of themselves, which was an amazing way to start a business. That's obviously completely different.
Different now, yeah.
It was just a great training ground in creativity, and it was, I think we did some amazing work there at the beginning, and it was a very different business to be in terms of how much work you did and how revisions were done and the conversations with clients. It was just a very different business back then.
How long were you together at Kaleidoscope, and how scary was it to branch off on your own?
We were there for 5 years, and Andy and Steve were moving their business to Beverly Hills, and it was going to be pretty costly for us.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to be in a building that was going to be very expensive. We didn't want to do that. We came here in this building that formerly known as the CNN building in Pittard Sullivan's old space, because it was already built out, and we couldn't take on the kind of expense that Steve really wanted to do, and it made sense because there's more. He could bill more for trailers than we could for print.
Yeah.
And we couldn't be saddled with it. It was a very because we're artists first, business people second. It was very scary. We probably went about it in too aggressive of a way. We had met Mike Ovitz along the line, and we hired him and quickly learned that was not the way to do things. With Steve Panama, that was not a good plan.
Mm-hmm.
However, Andy was very gracious, and he understood, and he was still supportive. of us.
Yeah.
um, it was scary to separate. I mean, it was a hard divorce of sorts, you know.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd say, I mean, just since this is really about Andy, there was his office at the Kaleidoscope, and then there was his house. And his house was just the mirror. His office, was a mirror image, where he tried to recreate his office to match his house. He had this most beautiful house on Hollywood, at the far end of Hollywood Boulevard, just before it became Laurel Canyon. It was this Moroccan style Spanish house, beautiful architecture, classic. I mean, it was in the way you talk about Andy being one of those classic Hollywood executives. I mean, it matched him, and and the first year we were in business, they had the Christmas party at Andy's house, you know, and he was so generous to welcome, and not a lot of people might necessarily welcome you into their home, you know. And we went to his house, and he had just this most amazing entourage of people, really flamboyant people. This is before RuPaul became, but it was that kind of group. It was incredible, just surrounded by artists and flamboyant people, and champagne and cocktails. It was a lifestyle that we hadn't really seen, you know,
Yeah, and
probably a lifestyle that didn't exist that much anymore. It was really old Hollywood.
Mhm.
but I knew his favorite film was dear me,
Casablanca.
Casablanca, and we did a happy birthday poster for him once, where we put his face in the poster and we printed it on watercolor paper for him, and he really treasured that. It was such a perfect thing for his Moroccan themed home.
I'm curious now, Dawn, did you have a little bit of punk influence on Andy at all?
I don't think I had any influence on Andy.
Okay. All right. Well, you certainly had an influence on me, but that's a whole other conversation. Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods is brought to you by 2496 Sound and Music. 2496 Sound and Music has been publishing music and sound design in Hollywood for over 2 decades. While most traditional libraries started with music first, 2496 started from the ground up, creating killer sound design elements for trailers and film campaigns. Then they started building a music catalog, which matches the sound design catalog perfectly, creating a powerful blend of sound, music, and emotion. Their founder, Lenny Jones, who's a pal of mine, really good guy, he is a motion picture and television sound editor with credits on top shows including Ancient Aliens and Unsolved Mysteries. 2496's sound design can be heard on current trailer campaigns, including many of the summer's box office hits. 2496's composers and sound designers hail from all over the globe, giving their clients not just 24/7 service, but an international style that will appeal to a global audience. They excel at rapid customizations and creative revisions, minimizing delays in your creative process. If you're looking for the sound of the next for your next trailer campaign, check out 2496 Sound and Music at 2496sfx.com. That's the numbers 2496 and SFX like sound effects. That's 2496sfx.com. Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods is brought to you by Soundstripe. So if you're an editor, a producer, a creative exec, a music supervisor, or even a podcaster like me, if you're a content creator of all stripes, if you will, and you're looking for the perfect library of music and sound effects, check out Soundstripe. With over 10,000 high-quality tracks, including music from Grammy-winning artists, Soundstripe makes music licensing hassle-free. Believe me, I've tried it. I've been on there. I've navigated around. It was really terrific. It was really easy to use. So with a simple subscription, you get unlimited access to a vast catalog, downloadable stems for creative flexibility, and AI song editing to customize tracks effortlessly. Plus, their seamless integration with Premiere, which is what most of my editor friends are on, it means a smoother editing experience. If you're ready to level up your production game with properly licensed, high-quality music and sound effects, head over to soundstripe.com/trailergeeks and save 10% with code trailergeeks. That's soundstripe.com/trailergeeks and code trailergeeks. It has been a little over 20 years since he passed away. What, if you could both answer this individually, what do you miss most about him?
Well, for me, I think Hollywood needs the Hollywood glamour and the that sort of mystique. There's something about old Hollywood and why people still come. We're close to Hollywood Boulevard here, and there's still tourists who come here. There's a reason for that old world, old Hollywood world, enigma of how movies actually got made, and everybody wanted to be part of it, and Andy represented why you wanted to be part of it, because you wanted to be around somebody like that, right? Whatever he was doing, you wanted to be part of what he was doing because there was this mystery to him, and he was gracious, and he was supportive, and he appreciated what you were doing. And that's rare because you don't find people who actually tell you how much they appreciate what you've done or what you're doing, or just kind of give you a pat on the back and say, that's cool. I like that. Or that you guys have done a good job. And like Clive said, he did tell us, he said we were one of the best investments he's ever made. And that was really a wonderful thing to hear, because starting a business was very stressful, and that's not what we were hearing from the other partner.
Yeah.
We were hearing there should be more,
Yeah.
What more could there be? So that's what I would say Andy embodied, and what's missing is a little bit of that persona, that there was an archetype. He was an archetype.
Mm.
That kind of propelled us forward and wanted us to do things at a certain level, a certain elegance, a certain standard, and he embodied that.
I didn't understand that, but Benny sent me this great. It's an uncut interview with Andy that I guess is from the vaults at UCLA, and because it's uncut and you see the bits that he's saying in between the questions, you get a sense of. I got a sense of what you're saying and what folks who've come on and joined in on the tribute have been saying, that there's an aura, but also a generosity of spirit, all at the same time. So I really appreciate that. Clive.
The thing I just wanted to say that everybody pretty much has been saying that, we went on, all of us and a few of us, to have our own companies. And what we learned from Andy was this great support, that I know I really made an effort to carry into Trailer Park. And I know from everybody who's worked there that Clive and Don and Rick have, created an environment in BLT that was what we learned from Andy. If you supportive me creatively and you give me wings, I will fly. I will blow you away. But if I don't have that, I won't feel as inspired. And Andy inspired us to, look at it. We had some pretty good careers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Clive, what do you miss most about Andy?
Yeah. To jump off what Benedict just said, I think we've learned over the years the most important elements of any company is its culture. Andy was a very cultured man, and he created a culture at Kaleidoscope Films along, with Steve and Mark and others people involved, that supports creativity. And if you create an environment that is supportive of its staff, you give them an environment that's creatively supportive, you give them the equipment they need to get the work done, and you're supportive of them, they'll do great work, and they'll remain loyal to you as well because you create this really supportive environment. And I think that was one of the things we took away from when we parted company with Andy. But and I think, unfortunately, the most important thing in this business in terms of longevity is adaptability, and you have to adapt. And I think even though at the time when we started in the business, Andy represented almost like a past Hollywood, but there's Hollywood has this incredible. We got into this because we were passionate about movies and the business, and Andy was a part of that passion. The stories he would tell about the way the business was when he first got into it. And
So
and one of the greatest memories I have of him now was, when we started BLT, we were going to be this small boutique agency of like 25 people. And then he came to see us. I can't remember how long ago it was. Maybe Dawn remember, but we were in this building and we were about 200 people, and he came to see us just to visit us. And he just told us how proud he was of us. And that was just a very, very special moment.
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting you say that about culture, Clive. I remember very early in my career, BLT was already, the dominant in key art, the dominant agency in key art, and building a AV, and this is before digital departments had really existed. But one of the things, I had already been to several other companies, inside of several other companies, and you definitely pick up a vibe. Some companies had a lot of closed doors. If you're sitting in a boss's office, there was either no one knocked on the door, or if somebody did enter, there was a, not just a deference, but like a kind of a scared kitty type of a. But the first time I walked in your office, Clive, you were working on a comp. You were building a comp, and like you were the B in BLT, and here you were like building a comp. And I think during the few minutes that we were sitting there, half hour or so that we were sitting there, 2 or 3 mid-level art directors came in, and it was just like a regular conversation, and everybody was felt very much at home with you and in the place. It was to your point, it was a very different vibe. And then connecting that to Kaleidoscope, I I came into the industry too late to really understand Andy's direct influence. But my one impression, maybe you'll appreciate this. I finally did go there toward the end of a Kaleidoscope's trajectory. And Helene, Helene was the receptionist. And she was, to me, she was the entry point to the culture. And I'm like, okay, I kind of understand. I have a little bit of a taste of it. She called me Cookie Face for some, I don't know what, but she just made me feel very much at home. So I'm kind of connecting the dots. All right. So I have a fun question, and then we can wrap it up. Benny, since you're here with Clive and Dawn, you can ask them questions, but be careful what you wish for, kind of a thing, because I'm going to let Clive and Dawn ask you a question as well. So, Benny, you first.
Well, the question I had for Clive and Dawn, they already kind of answered. I was trying to figure out how they had met Steve and Andy, how that happened. But what I'm actually curious about is also, how was it for you guys when you came into the building at Seward? You were coming into, there was a group there. How did that feel? Did you feel welcome?
I felt welcomed. I mean, it was so exciting. You guys had that amazing screening room. I'd never been into a company that had a screening room before. It just felt so Hollywood. And Andy and Steve let us design out that little back room however we wanted. And it just really felt like we were going to be part of everything. I felt very welcomed. I felt like I could go upstairs, and I think I sat in your office before. I sat in Paul Rollins' office. I sat in Ricky Goldstein's office and just talked. And I think, and who's the graphics person that used to come in? Bruce?
Bruce Schluter.
Bruce Schluter.
Oh, wow.
So, it was also the kind of thing where you all were really patient with us because you would want us to work on graphics. And a lot of times we didn't really know how to do graphics, but we would wing it. It's like, and a lot of times you would say it doesn't work like that. And it's like, well, let's try it. So it's fun that you brought up about the graphics. Some of the graphics that we did came about because we didn't know what we were doing. Right? But we were creative and wanted to give it a try. You know, it's like we didn't even, I can speak for myself. I didn't realize that a scroll goes up. I would think a scroll goes the wrong way. And it's like things that are obvious to you guys, we had to kind of learn. And that's to the point of what Clive was saying, is that we learned so much those first 5 years. And you all had, other than when whatever you were doing was too loud, um, um, your doors were open. We could come in and ask a question or brainstorm or just see what you were doing, or just some of you guys were just like sitting and playing on a guitar or something. But it was a very creative place and a very open place compared to where we had come from, where, like Clive said, and like Corey had said, where doors were closed and materials were hidden and it wasn't so open.
All right, now you get to ask Benny. You get to turn the tables.
Well, Benedict, if you could, I know this is probably a difficult question to answer, but if you could take away one thing from Kaleidoscope that helped you on your successful journey, what would you say that was?
Well, obviously it was Andy. Because and I've told a few anecdotes of at times where I collaborated with Andy and when I was stuck or I didn't know what to do. But mostly Clive is that, that persona. He was like a dad to me. I didn't have a great dad, so there was probably part of that relationship with him where the encouragement and the support meant so much to me. That I appreciated him giving me the freedom to explore artistically without any fear. They wouldn't be like, "What are you doing?" And some other people were more reserved about that. He gave me that inspiration, which I carry to this day with the young guys who I work with. I feel that's now my opportunity to pass on what I learned from Andy and to I think, as artists, all we were looking for is encouragement and an opportunity to do the crazy shit that nobody else would do and not be saying, well, what is this? What are you doing? And say, and even if they don't like saying, well, this is interesting, not what I was looking for, but so that's what I take from is just Andy's support, his kindness, and his friendship.
Yeah. I think, Corey, you've seen this in all the interviews that you've done. There's nothing bad you can say about Andy at all. It's just, and we've all worked at places and been in partnerships and been in business where a lot of the times it's hard to break up from those things, and you lose an employee and you feel angry towards them, And it was when we separated from Steve and Andy, it was a painful divorce, but nothing I could say is bad about him. And like I said, when he came back all those years later to visit us, it was just a very, very special moment.
Mm. Yeah. The only, it's not bad about Andy. It's just that he left us too soon, right? Dawn, did you have any questions for Benny?
No, just how was it for you leaving there? I mean, I vaguely remember you being there, but not being really part of knowing what your journey at that point. But I know the emotional part of leaving a place that you've worked for a long time. Um,
It was really difficult because basically I started there as a kid, and I was there 17 years. Um, and unfortunately I had come to the point towards the end of my time there where I had more and more artistic differences with Steve, and Andy was less and less involved, and there was an opportunity that came to me at Aspect, and again, Andy was extremely supportive, and Steve threatened to sue me, and then I think when I first got to Aspect and I did the Forrest Gump trailer, he shit on it, and it was like. It was just a difficult transition because, I mean, I had been their golden boy for all these years, and why all of a sudden was I was the enemy. Uh, Andy never, ever criticized me. He was always supportive. I've told this story, I think, last week when we did the interview with Trugman, I think it was. When I went to do the trailer for the Beatles in London, my wife and I stayed at the Covent Garden Hotel, and we come down in the lobby, and there's Andy.
Mm.
And we hug and we say hello. And then after he leaves, my wife said, "Who is that?" She thought he was a superstar. He was kind. He was friendly. I didn't have the luxury you guys had at BLT to have him come to Trailer Park and walk around and say he was proud. But I had retained a really pretty good friendship. So he had said, I'm proud of you. And, that meant the world to me too. So it was, yeah, parting, I think it is, and you guys have experienced it as company owners, and I have also with Trail Park when somebody left. I think when the first time I remember when Tommy Gargoda left Trailer Park, and Jim was still with us, and Tim and Jim said, "Fuck him, we're not gonna throw him a party," and blah blah blah. And I said, "No, no, 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 no. We're gonna throw him a big party because we're only where we are because of him." And I'd learned that from Andy. And I was always able, as Nick and when Bill Neal left Trailer Park, to say, "Thank you so much." All that came from Andy.
Mm.
But yeah, it was that was a rough departure from Kaleidoscope. It was. I remember. I left at the very end of December, and I had a TV campaign. I think I was doing the finishing at Editel on Island, and I went back to Kaleidoscope. Most people had left, and I remember walking out down that hallway with a little box, going, "This is it."
Mm.
I felt very sad, and but the rest is history.
Yeah, a lot of history. So we covered a lot, but is there anything important that we didn't cover that you'd like to add?
I think we should all bring back Ascots, though.
I love it. I'm getting to that age where, yeah, that would do me well, actually. Yeah, this has been really special. I am so glad that you joined us for this, Clive and Dawn, and Benny. It's always good to see you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Benny.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. As always, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us in the rankings and so that more folks can learn about Andy Kuehn and the history of this great industry. Follow us on all the socials. I am at Corey S. Nathan, at Corey, S as in Sam, Nathan. And please check out our awesome sponsors, 2496 Sound and Music Design, the Golden Trailer Awards, and Soundstripe. Really grateful to all those folks for helping us keep the lights on. Thanks again for joining us. Now go do some inspired work.